What's up, everybody? Hey, welcome back to Thinking OTB. Well, today we've got a guest that I'm actually very excited. Carin Nguyen's here.
My girl.
She is like real estate rock star, but also she's one of those people that I'm pretty sure I didn't like a lot during the foreclosure days because you could never get a hold of her. But we became friends and acquaintances to the business, and she just has a lot of knowledge and a lot of just amazing things in this business. So thanks for showing up today and kind of chatting with us. So
yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity. Of course, I have mutual respect for the both of you and excited for the fun that we're going to have in today's conversation.
We are going to have some fun because Bernie's already giggling.
I mean, I just love you to death. Like I have seriously like chick crush, right? We go way back. And I just think like every now and then I get these little, like we're sitting here and I'm having these little flashbacks to all these little things that we've done over the years. But no, one of the first things I'm thinking about was we did a class together and there was no overhead projector, which dates us in and of itself. But
oh my gosh.
Do you
overhead
remember?
Projector.
Or whatever it was, like a projector.
Yeah, it was a projector.
Yeah. And I had to go get one at the last minute. I mean, we just did whatever we needed to do.
Was it one of those glass ones that you put like the plastic and the Sharpie marker on?
I know I'm old, but we had graduated past that. But I just...
No, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad, but that's also a testament to your whatever it takes. And then at that point, you were like, well, I have a projector in my trunk. You always just had whatever you needed.
Yeah, I mean, just so many little flashbacks for some of the stuff that we've done together. And just even getting to know you, tracking you down, because you were with HUD when I was trying to get in your world.
Good luck tracking her down during those days.
Yeah.
It was a crazy time.
I know.
They were crazy times.
We go way back.
It was crazy times.
And
busy times.
Yeah, so awesome. Speaking of like thinking outside the box, how did you get into HUD? I mean, how many houses did you sell during those times just with HUD?
Just with HUD, well, in the height of it, was 600 in a year for HUD. So probably over that span of several years, maybe 1,800 with just HUD.
It's crazy.
Plus you had Fannie and Freddie, and because I think that's really
the trifecta.
Yeah, right. I think that's really where we met was during the Fannie and Freddie when they put us all brokers in the room and try to share whatever we were sharing to make things better for Fannie and Freddie in the days.
Yeah, I was a big prospector before REO, so
were you?
I prospected really for the first couple of banks that I got. And I was like, this is pretty great. And it proved to be a really great thing. And then I set out to try to get the trifecta. I called it. I was like, these are the big ones. And because the other ones that I got, they would get eaten up by the FDIC or just things would happen.
Right.
And so the clients that I had in the first couple of years, I didn't have any of those clients by, 2010. And so, I just started prospecting for business. I would just call and act like, figure out who the asset manager is or who the decision maker was for our territory. And then I would hang up and call back later the next day and like they're expecting my call. And so I would just keep calling them.
What did you do before real estate? Because I feel like you started with HUD, almost started with HUD at the beginning of your career, right?
No, I was in traditional before.
Were, okay.
Yeah, I saw the market boom and then drop.
Okay.
Before we hit that, so I started at the end of 2003.
Oh, that's right.
And it didn't fall out really until we wouldn't really feel it until 2007, I would say.
Yep.
And then really.
Now you went down the road kind of similar to what I did. You started your own brokerage. Was that around the time of?
I did that in 2010, so that was like right in the middle of all of the transactions.
Right.
And the height of the REO piece. I was at a discount brokerage and didn't have a ton of fees. And so they said I was costing the brokerage money. I was their number one producer, and I never needed the accolades, but they gave me a lot of a hard time, really. They wanted me to change the programs that I was on, and because they didn't have a good compensation model. And I was like, well, this doesn't seem right. And at the same time, I started getting wooed, we'll call it, by people that were selling franchises. And so I started investigating franchises. And then I was like, you know what? I actually had someone tell me who owned a franchise, not inside real estate, outside. And he said, just try it on your own, because when you get into the franchise model, you're going to get married to that. And you don't even know if you're going to like that world yet. So just try it on your own first. And that was really sound advice. And so that's what we did. We did independent first.
Yeah.
So we opened in 2010.
How many, at the height of it, how many agents did you have?
We had like mid-40s, like 45, 46 agents.
I remember you had a pretty healthy little brokerage going.
We had a really great tribe. We had a really great culture.
I used to love coming to your meetings. I was like,
it was so great. Like when we said we were closing the brokerage, the agents didn't want to leave. Like we said that, and we were like, we couldn't even close because
space.
they
They're
would
just
not.
in the basement.
Yeah, and we loved them too. So it was a hard decision. But the economics just didn't make sense, and we tried to change the economics. And unless I was really going to change the cost of how things were, I'd have to recruit hundreds and hundreds of agents to make the numbers work. So we just decided to have more focus on a team where we could go deeper with people and then have better economics.
I find that really interesting. I talked to an agent recently, and she was like, yeah, I'm in the midst of getting my broker's license because I'm going to open my own brokerage. I'm like, why? Why would you do that to yourself? She's like, well, because I want to have, and she's going through these reasons. And I'm like, I've been there, done that. It's like operating two different businesses, and it's always, you're with KW now, and it's always interesting where are you going to put your energy? It's like running the brokerage, or you can put the energy into the team, which is just kind of a brokerage inside a brokerage. Do you feel that that's where a lot of people are at this point in time? It's just,
I think everybody has, makes the right decision for them. Like there's some boutique brokerages, they have a different setup that could make more sense. Or some people operate more of like a team, but they call it, more of an umbrella as a brokerage. Right. It just didn't make sense for us. That's just not where I wanted to have the focus. And so I heard the term intrapreneur, right? That you could be an entrepreneur, but inside something that's a bigger umbrella.
Right.
And so looking at what Keller Williams had to offer at that time, there was a lot of things that were in sync with us. So it just made sense. Okay, great. Well, we can put our company or our business under their umbrella.
Yeah.
And then we are in alignment there. We can really grow.
How long did that whole decision process take you, right? Because there's a separation of like the ego, emotion, and then making the good business decision. Is that something that you moved through pretty quickly? Do you think that it was?
Yeah, I think I knew pretty quickly early on. I had some people around me that were like, no, we should keep doing this. And I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I think this, could be better over here, because it was just more about having a deeper impact. In hindsight, I could have just changed, right, and stayed that same course. That's not the path that, we chose, and I think it still worked out for the best. Yeah. But the focus for me was just going deeper with people, having a bigger impact, having a bigger contribution, and not just, kind of skimming the surface.
Well, I feel like too, like something that you've always been passionate about and really successful with is teams.
Yeah.
Like you've always been able to grow, maintain, pivot, and structure teams to be like the connection that you have with your folks is pretty cool.
Yeah. I think, in doing REO, once you're doing like thousands of transactions, which at the time I didn't have a team yet, I was forming a team, which I started administratively, which is a team, but it wasn't sales agent team. It was still me as the producer, and then supported by a fantastic supporting cast of people around me. And then once we started to look at transitioning back out of REO into a traditional world, I wasn't super excited about going, I call it back to the kitchen table, because at that point now I'd been leading a business and my day-to-day looked so much different. That just didn't seem like exciting or a challenge to me. I could have done it, right, and probably would have been super successful at it. Just wasn't fun and exciting to go back and do that. So I looked at everything that I'd done, all the good decisions, all the mistakes, and I said, why won't not help people that are trying to pick up their business and grow their business and help them get to where they're trying to go faster and also be more profitable? Because I think the three of us all know in real estate, it's one of the, there's a lot of ego, right? That happens in this business.
Really?
And so
I've never noticed it.
Right? Just kidding. Right? Like when you're like sitting on a bus bench. I'm not sitting on a bus bench these days, but I have in my life for sure. And sometimes you're sitting on a realtor's face right there. Like that's for like, hey, I'm here. No disrespect to anyone that is doing those advertisements, because some of that works, and it's we have a lot of that. It's prevalent in the industry, and so it's just taking. Let's be practical. Like let's work with people that really want to have a better quality of life, make more money, and they understand that they're running a business, right? Because that's the thing. I think most of us getting in, I know I sure didn't have that figured out. Coming in, I had no idea. I had just opened a business, and that's one of the things that makes me absolutely bonkers about our industry is that people get in and they have no clue. There's no education, prior or prerequisite. So
the barrier to entry is not much.
Yeah, it's getting harder. It's getting harder to pass that test. But the criteria that's in the test, right, there's nothing about building a business. Right. Like we're talking about meets and bounds and,
Well, I think that's the main thing, and I'd love for you to speak more to that. When agents get in, it's this, I want to make 6 figures and I want to go down this road, but they have nothing on the experience level of what you're about to embark on with the business side of things. And I always remember those constant arguments and with my dad about how the business, and it was just kind of run kind of wonky. And it was like this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And I was younger, so my dad wasn't listening to me. I didn't know anything. But I think it's interesting just to talk about the agents as their entry, and I've always had a huge respect for you as your leadership and seeing what you've done with your team and son and just bringing all those people together. But the vision to help those people understand that they're running a business. So with newer agents, what would you give them advice wise when they're kind of entering this business?
Yeah, what I've learned about us as people is that many don't tend to focus on the bigger picture. They're just looking at, this distance that they can see just in front of them, maybe as far as they can see, which tends to be not super far out. Right. And so they're making more short-term decisions instead of thinking with the end in mind about what is it that they want to build. And some people will think, bigger or further down the road. And that's where you'll hear people say things like, well, I want to be a broker. And I'll say, well, let's talk about that. What does that mean? Right. And most people don't really have an understanding of what the broker does or who they are. They think it's like the upper echelon of the salesperson, right? Like, now I've arrived, I'm the broker. And you go, well, that's not true at all. The broker is more of like compliance and operations. Again, that can look different in other companies, but as people are coming in, I usually ask the question, it's a first decision. Do you want to do this, be a solopreneur, or do you want to be part of a team? And for me, the deciding factor isn't looking at a team as just like a training ground. It's looking at what are you trying to accomplish long term? Do you get excited about building something, maybe by yourself, and you want to be the one to see your name up in lights? And, that fires you up every day to think about all the different aspects that have to happen when you're running a business. But you are definitely, you've just opened your business. Congratulations. Yeah. So are you going to partner because you're thinking with this in mind, right? Or you're going to be an entrepreneur, which is, where we've given up a 40-hour job to come work 80, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think you do such a great job too, like with a holistic approach, right? So from the business standpoint, but you get I feel like you dig in deep with each person individually to really learn about them, and I know that sometimes that's painful for you.
Yeah, we do. We dig in really deep. Yeah. And, when we meet with people, we're not attached to, and this has definitely been a migration because I'm extremely competitive. I used to be the one that was doing all the recruiting. And so I would find myself across from someone really knowing like they're probably not the best fit, but I want to win them over because I want to win, right? Yeah. And so I'm trying to convince them. And that's changed over time to understand, it doesn't matter if you come here, if it's a great fit, yes, please come here because we're all going to be super successful together. But let's just get to know each other and figure out what's important to you to navigate where is the best next step for you. Should you be trying to do this on your own and plugging into a brokerage, that has some type of like support to get you lifted? Is it on a team, but maybe it's a different team because what you're looking for, we're just not able to match that here. Right. But yeah, we definitely do a very deep dive, like behavioral assessments and just understanding what motivates people and what they're going to look like, and feel like in our environment.
Yeah.
Have you found that over the years, like through REO days and like right now, that your competitiveness, it's changed, like what you're competing for has changed?
Absolutely. Because, as you come in, it's like, what scoreboard are you looking at?
Right.
That's the question. So again, back to that, like, ego conversation in our industry, it does feel really great to sell a lot of units, but if you sell a lot of units and you don't have a lot of profit, or you sell a massive volume, and you don't have profit, what's the point? Now, you could have thinner margins because you're playing a volume game. That's okay. As long as you're still profitable, that's what works. Sure. But
whoever keeps the most amount of money is really who wins.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And I think we have to look at time also, right? Like, what's the amount of time? What's the sacrifice? What's the trade-off?
Quality of life.
So, time is finite. And so if you're putting in all of this time, you might be making great money, but if you're not getting to enjoy the money that you're making, you're going to save that for a rainy day or at some point in time, you're going to enjoy it. That's probably not going to work either. keeping in mind you do have to put in a lot of hours when you're getting started. You're launching your business, and at a certain point, you need to be able to shift and enjoy and put some boundaries. And I think that's another piece in our industry, you know, that we see that. I see that all the time in the message boards. You know, this is a 24/7 business, and why aren't people picking up their phone? And I'm like, why would you pick up your phone 24/7? Why would you answer your phone at, 9 or 10 o'clock at night?
I agree. One of my favorite phrases in this industry is, we're not saving lives here. I mean,
so there's no emergencies that happen after 5, right? Because you can't close a record after 5. So there's no emergencies that are happening in real estate after 5. Now today, I mean, if you're working with buyers, you're out there and there's an urgency.
There's a difference between urgent and important, and then
for sure.
Yeah. For sure, right?
For sure. And that's an important distinction.
Exactly.
That many of us don't make, right? And I'm definitely guilty of that, right? Of falling into doing what's urgent instead of what's important. You can only do that for so long before you look up and go, okay, I got to shift the priorities for sure.
What are you finding like on your team right now in terms of from an individual agent perspective? Like what is kind of the common theme that you've been dealing with in terms of getting people to rise up or stay, you know?
I think, you know, it always goes back to that resilience and the confidence that we can give them or that they already come in with, but confidence as fast as possible, getting the wins as early as possible. Because once they get one win, that will carry that momentum to keep them going. And sometimes it's just wins in activities, right? And being consistent with your activities until you're waiting for those results to happen. But I see consistency and grit, you know, to get launched. Yeah. Right. That resilience piece. Because this is a business of resilience. You got to be resilient.
Totally. I mean, I think it's cool because I get to work with you. So I've seen transformation from individuals on your team that came in, you know, in one way and like they're going through your easy bake oven and they're coming out the other side real good. Like
easy bake oven.
But it's not easy, right?
I'm going there next.
But seriously, I've seen like, I mean, I don't, you know who I'm talking about. There are people on your team that have really transformed themselves through working with you. And I mean, from a holistic standpoint, not just as practitioners in real estate, but they've become better people from, you know, being on your team.
Yeah, I think it's because we try to have like we're not just going to help you in this one area of business, because if we're not helping you in these other areas, it's really about your entire quality of life. And for me, it's really important the legacy that they're going to leave. Right. And so how do we influence that and help them, you know, create the most incredible legacy that they can actually create? And so we do focus a lot on, you know, what we were talking about earlier, like the emotional, like personal development, emotional fitness, you know, mental fitness, because that's a big part of the game, right? Like not taking things personally. Somebody that takes things incredibly personally in real estate is going to have a really hard time because they're going to take everything personally. And it's not, if someone doesn't call you back, they're just busy. That's like they do it. They didn't like you. They're just super busy. Yeah. Right. So if everything that happens, you're taking on personally, I mean, you're going to be in a tough spot. And so I think when we're constantly working on making ourselves better, I mean, that's one of my favorite quotes by Jim Rohn, which is work harder on yourself than you do your business. You're going to have a pretty incredible life. Something to that effect, right? I butchered it a little bit, but that's the, the gist
So
of it.
what are you doing internally besides the sales stuff? What's kind of the mental fitness that you're working with the agents, especially in today's market? I think we're going to see a handful of agents, like they're out. They're just not going to be able to handle the stress, the pressure, and what's going on right now. So what are you doing with your team for some of that mental fitness in a market that is like cutthroat at this point?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we've hired a separate coach, like non-traditional to real estate. So we have like a strategic coach who will talk about, you know, like he's back there with the team right now, role-playing objections, right? Like how to overcome some things in today's market. But we have another coach that's also helping them with more of the internal things that are happening. Because listen, the only reason we don't all have what we want today is that there's some limiting belief that's stopping us from it, right? And so it's us having those conversations, frankly, about what are those limitations that we're placing on ourselves. And if we don't have an awareness of that, number one, you know, you're dead before you start, right? So you have to have that awareness, and then having those uncomfortable moments, right? Like there's, you know, we go internal sometimes and have to figure out what those are to break through them and push through, you know, for that level of, you know, resilience where you are willing to submit 5 or 6 offers and you have to bring
all
the
at one
energy,
time.
right? All at one time, 5 or 6 offers to get, you know, 5 accept or rejected rather to get to like the next one accepted. So that takes a level of resilience on the agent, and then times multiple clients. And oh, by the way, you have to keep your client excited about that, at the same time. And that will show up again too when the market changes. You're going to have these conversations with your sellers about why they're motivated to do it. And if you're not right emotionally, you're going to bring that energetically to your relationships with your clients. So, I mean, I'm just a big believer of like, you either give or take energy. There's not really a neutral space.
Right.
And you got to be in a really great place to give off the energy that you need to give off to be successful in this business. Yeah,
it's interesting you say that, because it's been conversations I've had with buyers recently is having to tell some people you're not ready. Like, you're going to have to wait a little while. And some people telling them, are you really ready to fight emotionally and physically through this? Because it's going to take 6 houses that you're in love with before you get something. And if you're not willing to understand that, don't put yourself through this, because it's going to hurt. Yeah. It's going to be painful right now.
Yeah. And I think we were just talking about that this morning too, of using, for us, I really like the phrase home wealth consultants. I love that. And talking to, and considering ourselves not real estate agents, but more home wealth consultants, because, the old adage of a real estate agent, like, what did we do? Like, if you go back 20 or 30 years, what did a real estate agent, like, what was the value of the agent? Well, we had the inventory, because like before I got here, supposedly there was a book, right? Like, we didn't have the internet.
There was a telephone book.
There was a book of listings, right? And there was like faxes that exchanged between the brokerages. So we actually had the product. Well, today we don't have the product. The buyers can find the product. They don't need us for the product. Okay, well then we could open the door for them.
Right.
Okay, great. Well, soon enough, we probably won't need to open the door for them either. And so I think when you look at that, the value for me in that conversation is looking at the amount of wealth that somebody can create in home ownership. And most people have, they don't have the understanding really of the numbers. But if you look at the difference between somebody's net worth who's a renter versus a homeowner, I think the net worth of a renter is like $6,000 versus a homeowner is north of $150,000. Right. So it's a pretty drastic difference. And so for me, that's a different level of, again, confidence, knowledge, experience, data, right, that you can provide to your clients to say, it is going to be emotional. And some of this could be challenging. And here's why we're going to run through it to do it, because this is what it's going to look like for you, and, running out some of that math for them.
Right.
So and that's a different quality conversation too that most people are having. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And understanding, the normal too. I know you can appreciate this too, for the avenue of business that you do a lot of business in. The normal thinking is, I have a house, I'm going to buy another house, so I'm going to sell this one. Well, maybe not. Maybe you should actually look at renting it out, or, refinancing, taking some of the cash out if you needed to, right, for your down payment. But let's look at your net worth after a couple of years, or after 10 years or 15 or 20 years, if you actually rented some properties out.
You're going to get me all fired up on this conversation.
Sure. You buy, sell, right? And so, I mean, of course, that doesn't work for everyone. But usually people don't do things because they have a fear. And so if we can negate that fear by educating them of, hey, this is what this looks like, then we're going to significantly impact their legacy, right, and their family's net worth. And that's a valuable asset that we bring to the conversation. And I think, you obviously get business, and you can continue to build your business in your portfolio of clients when you operate that way.
And I think,
you guys are like twins.
Right. I mean, that's something that, has just kind of evolved in my business over the years as we've invested more and built portfolios and worked with people, is that realizing that when I do go sit across from somebody, or I do talk to somebody, the variables that can be presented are typically, in most players in the industry, it's only presented one way, which is a sell and buy. And that's how you get from point A to point B, because the person presenting those variables don't understand the backside of owning rental properties. They don't understand the investment side. They're giving information based on opinion and what they've heard, not on what they've experienced.
Yes.
And so for me, it's constant, like, okay, here's all the variables. Let's lay all these out and see which direction we can go, because I get really excited when somebody's like, well, maybe I should do this. I just talked to a client on Saturday, and he called. He's like, I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you talked me out of selling those houses last year and showing me what to do. Because he called me. He's like, I want to sell 2 houses so I can put my daughter through college. I'm like, this was not the point in owning these houses. The point was to create cash flowing assets to pay the payments for college, but not to sell them and create a tax liability that's going to create a college tuition bill. And so we talked through it, and I got him with my lender, and we moved 6 houses around. He ended up paying off 3, keeping 3, and he called to tell me that it created enough cash flow to pay the college tuition for his daughter, and he increased by 20% in appreciation last year. So he was just very appreciative that I talked him out of it. And I think most people don't have the ability to talk through that. So I love what you guys are doing.
That's a talk track for us with our team. It's like, okay, well, let's teach you how to have that conversation. Like, let's understand what a 1031 exchange is.
Yep.
Let's understand the rental conversation. Let's understand how to run the numbers and ROI. We had a great conversation this morning because, you know, a lot of buyers right now are going, well, I'm going to wait till the market cools off, or, you know, it's going to come down and all of this, right? And so 300,000 is a little bit lower on the side of average price right now, but it's an easy number to calculate, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so we said people think they're paying 300,000. They're not paying 300,000. If they put, you know, if they're doing FHA or if they're doing conventional, they put somewhere between like $9,000 and $15,000 down.
Right.
So they're only into it $9,000 or $15,000, not 300,000.
Right.
They're not paying 300,000. Yeah. And then let's look at the appreciation, and if we look at the historical averages in, you know, Arizona, it's north of the 3 to 5% national average. But even if you took that conservatively, you know, there's still going to be, like, after you factor in how they've paid down their mortgage, they're saving money by not paying rent. Yep. You're talking like $200,000 over the span of like 10 years.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
$200,000. Like, that's a significant amount of money. Like, most people would not balk at that. And if we know how to explain that, that's where I think, you know, we can make this impact that I talk about.
So when you're training everybody, do you guys do like role play practice? Like or do you just like throw them into the fire and then sacrifice that? Like sometimes they may not do well and you might lose, you know?
You know, there's a little bit of both. I mean, we're definitely about practice because I think most of the leaders in our team are very competitive, right? Like we use sports as an analogy, and I go, well, who goes to play for the great team or goes into the game, right, which is working with your client, without practicing at all? Like, how's that going to go? How are you going to show up, right? So there definitely is a daily practice that we do as a team. It's mandatory for people as they're starting, as, you know, they're just taking off soaring. They don't need to come and do that in the morning, although many of the great ones still do, right? Because they recognize they need to keep their skills fresh, in those conversations. So we do a morning huddle and role play. However, there does have to be a little bit, in my opinion, of like throwing them in to get them going, because I also need to make sure you're not going to continue to sit on the edge of the pool, right? Like, you're not going to learn how to swim no matter how many videos you watch, how many great podcasts you listen to like this one, books you read, like whatever you do, you're going to have to take action. Yes.
You can't be a spectator, realtor.
You cannot be a spectator, right? So you have to take action, and we're going to be there, right? So you're going to doggy paddle, and, you know, you're going to take on some water, and we're going to pluck you back out. We're going to put you back on the side of the pool, right? And then we're going to go, okay, great. Let's reassess. What went well? What do you need to work on? Practice again. Okay, great. Let's go back in there. And so it's this constant process, right?
There's too many variables in the conversation. Right. So because you can go in all these different directions, and if you haven't seen it yet,
right.
Just like if you've never seen a trashed house before, you know, there's too many variables in it.
There's too many variables.
Right. Yeah. So you have to kind of practice to get prepared for that next conversation. I always equate it from the days of when I worked on cars. I'm like, okay, so when you're a auto mechanic, you're paid on flagged hours. So if it's 2 hours you get paid to do the brakes on this car and it took you 4, you still only got paid for 2. But you practiced on that and you know the variable, so you can do it faster the next time. Or you're prepared for the noise that you hear. Oh, well, I've heard that before, so you can go back to it. And the more you hear those different conversations, the more you're prepared to help somebody, you know, guide them down that road.
Yeah. I think another critical skill that we teach is asking questions.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Isn't
I always say that
asking questions is critical skill.
It is, right? And so, I mean, Oprah has been touted, right, of being like the best interviewer of all time, right? And based on the questions that she asks. Yeah. So I think the new people definitely have a competitive advantage because they don't know as much. They haven't seen as much. And the irony is that they're the ones that are afraid. They don't want to ask a question because they're like, what if I don't know the answer to that? And I'm like, that's actually a great thing. Because all of these other agents that think they already know the answer aren't asking the question. They're making the assumption, right? So just go in there and ask a bunch of questions And then you're more likely to actually get the person the outcome that they're looking for instead of going in making all the assumptions, or that we're guilty of that we kind of talked about as the real estate agent. The iBuyers have shown us it's not most important all the time to get the highest net, right? But that's been, something that some agents tout is like, oh, I can net you the most money. Well, why would you show up and say that if that's not their main priority?
Right.
Right. Like find out if that's the priority first, and then you can use that talk track. But if it's not the priority, then you need to have a different option. And so I think that's another important piece that we've given our clients options and then our agents options to make them more powerful in the conversations, right? Like we work with the iBuyers. Like we've had open partnerships with Open Door and Zillow and some of these other iBuyers in the marketplace, Keller Offers, investors, ourselves, right? Like we purchase. So it's giving them options and being okay with that. It's not your decision. It's what makes the most sense for them. But you don't figure that out unless you're asking questions.
Right. And I think that's been the nature of our business is, when you hear some people that have been around a while, there's one broker that I've struggled with when we've had conversations is it's always this, I got to get the most money. Well, you got to get the most money for the situation that they're in and the option that they want. And it's not always the highest price for that property.
Correct.
It's the most amount of money for the situation that feeds them at the end of the day. And so I always love that when I tell people, it's like, here's the options for the situation you're in. Does this work or doesn't it? We have all these different solutions. Like you talk about the iBuyers, the Me Buyer, the Carin buyer,
Yeah, right.
So transitioning into that question, when you're talking about your agents, how often are you guys talking about net worth as a goal?
Once a month, because I do a Millionaires Club.
Okay.
That's open to everybody in our team. And so that is the scoreboard, is the net worth.
That's cool.
Which really changes how you look at money and how you're spending money because, I grew up super poor, and that's definitely not what my parents look like. So I didn't get that intuition or thought, from the background or my upbringing. It was look at your bank account balance, right?
Right.
Or you're negative, like how far negative is it?
Yeah.
Right?
Or
like,
does my credit card work?
Does the credit card work, right? Like, can I actually, use this? And so that's a very different picture because you could actually have a pretty decent bank balance and be negative net worth.
Right.
Absolutely. And some people don't understand that. And so when you start tracking the net worth, you really have a different focus of how you're spending money and how you're building money, creating money.
It's motivating too.
It is motivating.
Yeah, something
it's a much
to
better scoreboard.
aspire to. Yeah.
It's a much better scoreboard.
Yeah, that's really fun. That actually could be really fun too, especially if you've got like a mix of people that have experience or don't have experience, young, old, whatever. Like what a great goal for anybody.
Yeah.
Can I come to the Millionaire Club one day?
Of course you can. We just had one on Tuesday or once a month on Tuesday.
See that? That sounds exciting.
Yeah. And so it's where we need to be at the time. Sometimes we're talking about strategies, right? Of how you can increase your net worth.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're talking about psychologically.
Yeah.
Because we all have a relationship with money and feelings and beliefs about money. And we all have a financial thermostat.
Yep.
And so we actually have that in both ways, right? Like if you go down too far, it will light you up and you'll get into action. If you go up too high, you will also pause.
Become complacent.
There's this a feeling of like, I deserve to make this much. And again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, we all get what we feel like we deserve. And so if we're not making, the first time I heard that really pissed me off.
Yeah.
Oh man, that just fired me up because somebody said, whatever you're making right now, you only make that much because that's how much you feel like you deserve your worth. I'm like, what? And I had to marinate on that a little bit. And I was like, yeah, that is true, actually. That is true. Like there's some limiting beliefs, obviously, that are in here that have prevented me from going to a next level, right? So.
Well, it's hard to dig deep and figure out what that is sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Right? Because that's the part that makes you mad is that like, what is it then?
Yes. Like, what is it? And then you identify it. And then that's the empowering part comes on the other side of that, right? Like once you get out of the way of yourself, you go, okay, now that I've identified it, I got to resolve this. Totally. I got to resolve this. But, life's a dance between our desires and our fears.
Right.
And so I either got to increase my desires or lower my fears. And on
any given day.
On every day, right? On every day. And so, to dance the dance I want.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, you and Son, as real estate agents, when did you start acquiring rental properties?
So we started acquiring rental properties as we were married and we moved out of our first house.
Okay.
We actually made that a rental.
Okay.
So it was the first rental that we had. And then we, during the boom and bust, like 06 era, we purchased a property and we were going to turn around and sell it after we rented it for a short period of time and then couldn't do that.
Right.
So we still have that one today. We're in fine place today because it's,
Right.
so many years later.
For sure.
And then we've just started acquiring, other rentals.
How much regret do you have, like me, that we weren't buying more stuff in?
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. And you know what? And what you're referring to, right, is like we saw houses that were like at $80 a square foot. I just looked at it today, and I mean, some of them were cheaper than that. I mean, because I had some things
I'm thinking
like
about some
areas.
Maryville homes that we could have bought for 19 grand that had 4 walls and a roof, and you could put a fence around it.
We could have redone that. But I was just looking at that, right? Like at the low, it was like $50 to $80 a square foot, and today it's over like $236 or something, right? It's
so
like way
crazy.
up there. And so, yes, so much so. But that's another piece, right? I heard someone say, you guys in real estate are funny because you guys just work for tips. And I'm like, tips? Like, what do you mean? He's like, and your tips aren't even that much because like a waiter or waitress, they get paid 20% tip, if they're good. You guys are only getting paid like 2 to 3%. And I'm like, what? And so that really, I was like, that's a good point, right? Because we're working off of a commission was the point, right? A percentage instead of also looking at ourselves as a buyer for those properties as well, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take you guys to kind of mentally shift into?
So long. Decade. Like more than a decade. Like so long. Because just like most of the people that are listening to that and having this thought right now, it's like not to feel bad. It's just, you just don't know what you don't know. If there's no one there that's tapping you to say, hey, have you ever looked at it from this perspective? Then you don't see it, right? Like you just think you're doing great, but there's some of the top producers that have no rental portfolio, but they have, great accolades. And I could say I'm one of them, right? Like I definitely don't have a rental portfolio like I would like to have. And we're continuing to build it, right? Like, got to start somewhere.
We got to start somewhere. And I think that that's the thing that I have been preaching more of. And that's why I asked about like the net worth thing. And I think that it's not talked about in our industry, the opportunity to create net worth and a long-term legacy with your real estate license. So many people are looking at the income aspect and never looking at the opportunity aspect. And it took me years working with my dad and then coming out of the REOs going, if my mindset was different in 2008, rather than selling houses for $1,000 for a tip, I should have been finding money to buy those homes to create that long term. And so, that was where it shifted for me in 15 when my dad passed, was like, oh, light bulb. I can't watch as I work for tips why these people continue. I need to do some of that for myself. And that's kind of my passion now with the agents in the industry. It's like, guys, like you got to start somewhere. And you've got to be willing to do this for the long haul. Yeah, you're going to buy some stuff in the market that might be high now. Who knows? It could be like Bitcoin next year and go shoot up, and you're going to wish you would have.
Yeah.
People last year, I mean, how many buyers do we have right now that waited on the sidelines last year, and now they've been priced out of the market?
Absolutely.
Because they wanted to wait rather than, hey, so what if it goes down? I can afford it. Or it's going to be rented. So I was just kind of curious, your mindset around that. Do you guys have any goals?
We have some annual goals, of how many we're picking up. The other thing that we're doing too right now though is flipping, and we haven't been flipping at all. And so the thing that I would add to that is like step one is now you've heard a different perspective if you're listening to this, right? Of okay, and the word tips is a trigger word, right? It's meant to kind of tick you off a little bit so that you go, well, I don't want to work for that, I want to work for the opportunity and get these other pieces that I can add to my portfolio and increase my net worth. But the second part is fear. Right. The reason that most people wouldn't go out and purchase either as the rental or the flip is because there's a fear. It's either a fear that they have internally about, oh my gosh, what if this happens? Right. Like they're thinking worst case scenario, the what ifs, or they're thinking, oh my gosh, that's out of integrity for my client. Right. Like this is the person that I'm talking to, and maybe that's not what's going to be in their best interest. Right. So it's usually one of those two things that would prevent them. I know you have a really great talk track on, is it in the best interest of the client? Again, kind of goes back to the option. So
right.
You're just looking at that. And if you can be the open door or the Zillow or the investor, they're going to take that. Like, why would you allow Open Door or Zillow to acquire one more property? Why wouldn't you take that opportunity and still help them out, right? You can give them a post-possession, like do all these things. Like, you can still help them out. The other one, though, is a worst-case scenario and the whole what-ifs, right?
Yep.
And
fear of loss.
Yeah, the fear of loss, right? The fear of making a bad decision.
Totally.
And so I think
been there. I wrote the book on that.
I think we've all had some experience in those. And I think it's just walking that out, right? Because usually, and with someone else besides yourself, right? Like walking that out. What is the worst thing that we think that could happen? And so we actually just talked about this on a flip that we did a couple of months ago. And I was like, I don't know if I would have picked this one up. And Son's like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? How much? And then we just started playing the money game. He's like, what if, we got into it and we actually lost money? Would you be okay with that? And I said, I'm okay with that. I get like you're not going to win on every single one of them. I get that. I'm okay. He said, all right. He just started playing the number. Would you be okay with 5,000? Yep. 10,000. Yep. 15,000. Yep. He went over 15,000. Said, I'm out. I said that was my threshold on that particular property. He's like, okay, great. Well, what's the likelihood? Like, let's look at this. Let's look at the numbers. What's the likelihood that we would lose $15,000 on that? I said, not probable. He's like, not probable, like how much? Like on a scale of 0 and 100%?
Yeah.
I said, like, probably less than 5% chance that would happen. He's like, okay, so that seems like a small risk. Like, okay, good, let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But we had to walk through that, right? We had that conversation to go, okay, now we can do that. And we turned around, I think we made like 48,000.
That's awesome.
So let me add worst case on that is this is something that I learned from a couple of things that I look back and regret. And I won't ever play the worst case scenario again on what if I lose. The question is, if it gets to a threshold, I'm out. It goes to being a rental. Right?
Yeah,
so I'm not going to lose money.
Yeah, like that's the worst case.
Right now.
And that came up in our conversation too. Actually, thanks for reminding me that. He said, like, well, what's the worst case? Would we keep it as a rental?
Yeah.
And I didn't really like that choice of where it was. I was like, no.
Right, we don't.
But you played out every scenario.
But we played out the scenarios, yeah. But that's an excellent point because that is, like, just add that to your portfolio.
Right, you just add it to the portfolio and call it a day and go, well, there's some houses that we lost a bunch of money on probably 3 years ago that I'm like, man, if I would have just taken the negative.
Hung on to that. And
hung on to it for 3 years, what would it look like now? I mean, it's always looking at those worst case scenarios, but my worst case scenario is always like, it's never a loss. It's just going to be a rental. I would rather pay negative $200 a month on a rental than take a $15,000 loss.
And that's smart, right? Like and it's looking at the bigger picture.
It's the bigger picture because there's also the tax ramification of having a depreciating asset that's adding to that value. And you're like, oh, well, here's all the advantage of just having a negative.
Yes.
I mean, obviously you have to be able to afford to do it, but I'd rather do that than to write a check for 10 grand. And go, well, at least I can put it on a payment plan.
Yes. Yes. That is putting that on a payment plan, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good perspective.
Totally. Well, and also to be able to pivot quickly, like to just be able to assess the scenario, figure out the solutions, and then go.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you guys, obviously mindset, you guys have had a few, where would you tell an agent to start that's thinking like they've never thought about it? From your perspective, where would you tell an agent to start from the rental or the opportunity or the mindset piece?
I think it's following a model. Like I'm a big fan of following someone's model that works, and walking that out to figure out what that's going to do for you. Because there has to be a motivation behind it too. Because you can learn all you can and never take action. So I think you'd have to determine, well, what's the motivation behind you to get it done? If you feel like there is a good enough charge that you're going to go out and do it, then you're going to figure out a model. I don't know if you're still teaching that class, but the Limitless program that you do is incredible, and it will help walk you through understanding, numbers and analyzing the rents and flip and knowing what to do, because that's a scary thing. If you've never flipped a property before, to go, well, what's that going to look like? If you've never been a landlord before, right? What is that going to look like? And understanding what the laws are, because that's an important one, especially as being licensed real estate agents. That you.
That's why I don't touch those things. They all go to the property management
that
company.
Goes to the PM side of the company, right?
Yeah.
And are you going to get it? Are you going to use a property manager? Because then that takes even more of the liability and I guess worry is probably the best way to say that, or stress off of you. And so try to figure out, well, what else is stopping you? What's getting in the way from that point?
Yeah, I think it's really important. You're right. I think somebody has to follow a model, and I think they need to get some education on it. And I think it's also a mindset to make sure that, hey, there's a goal in mind. You know, you guys have goals on what you want to acquire, what you want to keep. I have goals on what we want to acquire and what we want to keep, to get to that net worth goal, yes, which is going to provide an income that's going to provide a legacy, and there's all those things.
But that's the pivot, just so that people are clear. The more doors that you own, the less you are a slave to the everyday of the business.
Correct.
Right.
So that's an important, it doesn't matter, you know, like Carin in her first 10 years, like, I don't care, you know, like stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning and 2 kids in hand and whatever, going at this furious pace.
Right.
Today I'm looking at the next, you know, leg of the journey, and I go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. We need more doors to have that income that's coming in.
I think one of the things too is that as you start to do it, it goes back to the agent conversations. There's all these variables. So you start learning. You're like, okay, that wasn't a great idea, or this I could have done better, so the next time. Or rental properties, you start realizing maybe this is better or this isn't the right one. You know, we talked about in my course, like the buy box. Like what does your buy box look like, and creating that buy box so you know what it looks like. You know, what's the worst case scenario? You go on a listing appointment and you have to pay retail for that property, you know, to put into your portfolio, but it's an opportunity, especially in today's market. You don't have to fight for it.
That in of itself is the opportunity, right, in today's market.
But then it's also starting to, you start getting experience enough to where, you know, randomly it's like, right now I'm going through a whole different thinking outside the box with things. Like, I just bought a mobile home lot at 107th Avenue and Union Hills, but I'm going to be into a brand new manufactured home for $170,000 that rents for $1,500 a month. So now I'm trying to create the asset and think outside the box. So as you practice, things start coming up and you start realizing there's more to it, and it actually becomes an exciting part of the business. So you've got the income piece, which we all serve our clients and we have our teams going through that. But then you have this other piece that is a lot of fun. And I really encourage agents to, like, don't forget, you are just as important as your clients. You're a client yourself.
Yeah.
Make sure that that's part of your business model.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is look back, and I mention this all the time. Don't look back like my dad at age 63 and have terminal cancer and realize that you don't own a single piece, but you've built a lot of wealth for people and you've left a great legacy for other people, but you didn't do it for yourself.
Yeah. You know what, Steve, as you're saying that, it reminds me of something I learned in going through Tony Robbins' mastery courses. And he talks about state, story, and strategy, and being importance in that order. And a lot of people, most people actually, want to figure out the how, which is the strategy. And they're like, well, when I know how, then I'll go do it. And that's actually BS, because that's like a diet plan, right? Like, if you're not dieting, it's not because you don't know how. There's like hundreds of diet plans, and we know many of them work, but you know, somebody's still not using it. So it has nothing to do actually with the how. And then you go to the story. There's like a story we're usually telling ourselves. But it really starts with your state. Like, what's your mental state? Mm-hmm. So if you're determined, right, like whatever it takes, I am going to do it, like the why, right, the motivation, then you will figure out the strategy. And it makes me think about money, right? Because some people listening would say, but I don't have money. You guys, you know, you must have money. Or,
I love that excuse.
You know, I just don't have access to that type of money. And success is not the resources. It's the ability to be resourceful.
Correct.
And I promise you, if you find the opportunity, you absolutely will find the money
all day long.
But you're like,
Every
you're not
time.
even looking for it because
Right.
you're saying, like right now we're seeing dozens of opportunity. I promise you, whoever's listening, you see so many opportunities on a daily basis, but you're blinded to them. Like, you have your blinders on because you're thinking like, well, I don't have the money. You're not in the right state.
Yeah.
Your state is not in the right place, right? If you were like, yes, I have to go out and find opportunity and I'll figure that part out. You just do that one time. You're like, change in belief, right? Okay, great. Now I see how this goes. You shift that belief and you change everything else. Yeah. And it's just a roller coaster from there.
The belief shifts from, I found this really good opportunity. I need to go find a buyer for it so that I can double in the commission. Rather than, so you can double your tips.
Yes.
Rather than, I have a really good opportunity. I need to go find money. So stop spending the time trying to find a buyer and start, You are the buyer. You're there.
Yeah,
Go
totally.
find the money.
Totally.
Go find the opportunity. You'll find the money. It might be expensive at first,
Yeah.
but you got to start somewhere.
Yes.
What
But you'll find something. You'll find a buyer. Whether
Yeah.
you wholesale it, you do a hard
You'll
money
find
loan,
some-
you find
yeah.
it, like you will find it.
Yep. Something.
What
I
are some?
promise. You can call Steve and I.
There you go, right there.
Always.
What
Me
are-
first, then. Oh.
What are
Steve first.
some?
It's his podcast.
Yeah, there you go. But what are like some like snippets that you can think of, like OTB moments in your life or in the team or in building your real estate career that kind of changed for you, like created a pivot moment, created a trajectory change for things? Like I'm sure you've got a couple good stories that you could probably share on that.
Pivot moments. You know, it may not be a traditional answer, but one of them is in the tonality that we use. And so
That's huge.
I heard this phrase one time, so I'm going to share it. Anyone that's like taken a class with me has already heard me do this before. Bernie's probably heard it. But if you wrote down the words, a woman without her man is nothing. Right? And I always write that up on the board. And sorry, Steve, I always make a man read it. And I go, okay, read it. And then I go, what does that mean to you? And the man says, what does that mean to you? They'll say something like, well, you know, a woman needs a man. And I go, that's interesting. Okay, can I read it to you? And they're like, oh, crap. Okay, go ahead. And I'm like, a woman, without her, man is nothing. And I said, what does that mean? And completely different meaning, right? And so the thought behind that is that we are saying things saying things all day long, and we think we're giving it a particular meaning, but we're not giving it the right meaning, or we're changing the context. And
That's
so
good.
in one of like training the agents and like just in myself, right? You're talking about like OTB moments. That's a big one because it's understanding the power of language.
Yes.
And we're in a business of communication.
The words
and so,
we use.
Yes. So if you're not focusing, we can talk about mindset and emotional fitness and all those things, but one of the biggest skill sets that we should be building is language, because we communicate with people every day. So back to, if we're not getting what we want, well, how did we influence that decision, right? What was our talk track, or what were our beliefs, or what was our tonality, the languaging that we used, right? So sometimes the language that we use, we actually talk people out of it.
Mm-hmm. Or
that's
the
not
language we use with ourselves, even.
and the language that we use with ourselves, right? Like that's a big
Huge.
one. So I would say understanding the power of language first and foremost, and then I think it's just looking at opportunity, right? If everyone's going right, I'm going to look at the opportunity to go left.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the out of the box moments, somebody may say like, well, what are you going to partner with Open Door for? Oh my gosh, don't do that. And I'm thinking, well, this
Why
is an
not?
opportunity to help more people. It's an opportunity to help our clients. Like, why wouldn't we do that? And then, same thing with some of the other opportunities that we've done. And some of them can seem out of the box. I mean, and we were talking about presenting iBuyer offers when people were like, I'm not even going to bring that up.
Right.
And what we noticed when we first started talking about that, we changed. I was like, okay, we have this old tired listing presentation or conversation, and it's one-sided, right? It's go back to the whole like net you the highest amount,
Right.
instead of presenting options. So when we
or
changed
asking
that,
questions.
and we would bring up like the iBuyers, people would say, "Oh, you know about them? You know that we talked to them already, or you know that we were exploring
you?
that.
That's
Who
so
told you,
funny.
right? Like you're in my email." And so it brought a much different conversation again. I think then it brought a different value that we could bring to that conversation. And at the time, I think it's become much more normal. It's still not all the way there today, but it's much more normal today than it was 4 or 5 years ago when we were doing that. But it's just pivoting, trying to pivot quickly.
I mean, talking about the iBuyers is like, if you don't talk about it, it's just kind of like shoved under the rug and everybody's thinking about it. I always think about my teenagers. Like, if we're not talking about it, somebody's thinking about it.
Yes.
You got teenagers, right? And boys.
Yes.
So speaking of family, as we shift a little bit, so we have some of that commonality. You and your husband are working together. My wife and I have worked together for 21 years. We have
God help us all.
different sides of the business, right? But you've got a daughter that's transitioned into the business.
Yeah.
We kind of talk about like what that's been like. I mean, not only your daughter, but your husband transitioned to the business later as well. I mean, he's been doing it for
He's in his 9th year now.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, it's been
God,
that
I remember
long.
when he
Yeah.
was just transitioning into that.
Yeah.
We're all getting old.
And older.
Old.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a fun story with her transitioning. She's 24, and she actually got a degree in civil engineering. Atta girl, she got a softball full ride scholarship and wanted to be a civil engineer. So she went and did her thing out in Indiana, froze her tail off out there.
Yep.
And then came back to Phoenix and pursued that for 2 years. And early on, when she wanted to be a civil engineer, I wasn't super excited about that for her. Not that there's anything wrong with that industry. I was like, you have a lot of personality.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
and
so
that's
funny.
a bad
And
stereotype.
I've worked with engineers before.
And that's a bad stereotype because,
I know, right?
That's not true. And she's like, yeah, this is, what I want to do. And I said, but you could do this and you could do this in our sales organization, being selfish, right? Like you could run this part and you'd be incredible. And she wasn't hearing it. She wasn't having it. She's like, nope, I'm going to go do this over here. And I said, all right, I just want you to know if you ever are doing something and you don't like what you're doing, you're not stuck there. Just because you got a degree in something or you have like any amount of time, don't invest more time into that, right? It's like a bad relationship.
Totally.
It's like, why would you stay in a bad relationship just because you have X number of years invested? Get out of there and go find a new one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some stick-to-itiveness, but after you've determined, yes, it's just not the thing for me, pivot, right?
Yeah.
And so almost like as soon as I let off from that, she came knocking the door and was like, I think I'm going to get my real estate license. And even at that point, I was like, really? Okay, great. I was like, really? Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you want to do? And she said, yeah. And I said, all right. And I just was very hands off about the whole thing. And she got her license, and she did that in August of last year, and came onto our team, of course. And she's already closed 23 houses. And
awesome.
She's
That's amazing.
Off to a rock star of a start. She's in that mode of like, I got to figure out boundaries though.
Yes.
Right. And like having, figuring out life. I mean, she's still at the point where I would call it, she's getting her jumbo jet off the tarmac and like really getting that momentum. So,
that's so
she's
cool.
like, Mom, I don't know how you did that. There's like all of us kids, because I have 4 kids
know.
and they were all small when I got started. She's like, I have no idea.
It's crazy,
how
right?
you did that. It almost pains me. I'm like, I don't want you to realize that.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have to go through that. But she has no kids right now, and so
it's so funny. When we went to lunch, the 3 of us went to lunch. It was the first time I was with you with your daughter, and I was sitting there. I was tripping out. I was like, "How is this Carin's daughter? This is just not possible."
Yeah.
And then the waiter
really
chimes in and was just like, "What? This is your daughter?"
Yes. She loves that conversation. Yeah.
But do you think it's important? The conversations that you had with her, kind of leaving the door open and her going to college and going through those things. Obviously, it wasn't a disappointment, but do you think it was important to leave that door open for her for you parents out there that are like, I want my kid to do real estate?
The unfortunate part about a podcast is you can't see that. But I had a really great mentor that gave me a physical demonstration, and he basically put his hand out and told me to put my hand out, right? And he pushed up against my hand. And it eventually, I started pushing him back. And then he stopped pushing, and then I stopped pushing. And he said, why did you push me? I never told you to push me. And I just kind of like paused and thought about that. And he's like, right, because if you push, at some point, everybody has a point of resistance. They will push you back. And when you stop pushing, they stop pushing. So that's been a powerful lesson for me in like my kids, caring for my dad, my marriage, training our age, like the whole bit of it, because the more I'm pushing for something, there is this resistance that comes about. And it is hard and scary, I guess, sometimes to let go, right? But if we're trying to control something, we have to recognize it's a fear anyway.
Right.
There's a fear that's taken hold that we're trying to maintain control or gain control.
Gaintain.
Yeah, gaintain. That's a new word. Gaintain.
I like it.
And it's probably has something to do with certainty, right? Like we've lost a level of certainty, and so we're trying to bring this certainty back in, and then we start focusing on all the things that ironically we can't control instead of what we can control. And so I think with her, that was, a big piece of it, is that I had to naturally let go. And even still to this day, like I'm very hands off with, how she does things in the business. I'm not the one, she has like contract question or, things she can call and ask, but I'm not the one giving her the day to day.
Right.
And I'm just letting her soar, and she's doing it. She's spreading her wings and absolutely fine.
It's just so similar. Like when I interviewed Jazzy and we were kind of talking back and forth because, you know, she entered the business with rock star parents and big name and those types of things. And I did the same thing with my parents, which was a little scary because you got big shoes to fill. Yeah. But I remember my dad giving me like, hey, the door's always open if you ever want to try it, but it's not going to be easy, you know, because I love to work on cars and go through those things. And, you know, once I finally was sick of rolling around on the hot asphalt, I'm like, can I try the real estate thing? Because this sucks.
Right.
But he never closed the door. It was never that thing. And I think that as parents, you know, my son's 18 right now. He's working 2 different jobs and he's having fun, but he's getting experiences. And the door's always been left open. Like, hey, if this entices you or intrigues you, then let's have the conversation. But you're right, the resistance thing. I'm not pushing. I'm not, you know, at this age, I think, God, we can go into a whole conversation. The pushing the teens to know what they're supposed to be doing for the rest of their life at 18 is just insane to me.
Yeah. I mean, I have a senior in high school. He's been struggling for the last 2 years because he's like, all my friends, you know, they want to do this. And I was like, they don't really know that.
Yeah.
They don't know shit.
They don't really know that. I said, and some of them will start that, and some unfortunately will keep going even though it's not what they want to do. And some will pivot because that's not it. But it's okay, right? Like, you don't have to, when you do something and you don't like it, you're not a tree. Like,
and the question is how much of that is being influenced by
their parents. Of course, right?
All day long.
Of course. Like, that's a hefty influence. So, I mean, we have to recognize that when we're pushing them, it's about our own stuff. Like, our own stuff is live up, right? We're trying to, I want you to succeed as a child because of how that makes me look and feel. Like, that's not.
Or what I did or didn't have.
Or I didn't have, right? Like, all of these different, like, our own stuff, right, is just getting lit up. And so we just have to let them, as hard as that is, of course, like, make sure we're giving them the right guidance and foundation and principles and morals and all of those things. But then you also have to trust at a certain point that they're going to make the decisions. It's like one of the main reasons I put a team in place, right, is like, okay, we're going to do this process and system so you never have to experience the pain that I had of not doing this way. Guess what happens? They still go out and don't follow the process and they get burned and they're like, oh, I should do it this way. That's actually better. Yeah, it's exactly the same way with our kids, and they have to experience life's lessons just like we all have to get that.
Where does it come from for you to kind of know how to do that with your kids, with your team? Because I mean, your growing up wasn't necessarily full of great, you know, experiences.
Puppies and ponies,
right? Sunshine and glitter, right?
It wasn't right. Like, I definitely had my fair share of hardships, you know, growing up for sure. But I also have a fair share of great memories. And so one of the things that I am very clear on, though, is that my mom was tried to be controlling, you know, at a certain point. And the more control I've tried to exercise as an adult over whoever, the less control I actually have, the less influence I actually have. And so I think it's, for me, understanding that principle right there in of itself.
Yeah.
Right? Is that,
but that's such a huge concept to think of, and, you know, for you to even have that thought process, right? That in and of itself is like pretty big.
But probably came from a lot of pain of like trying to control things.
Yeah.
And then how does that feel, right? Like, I think we've probably all been in a situation where we could feel someone trying to exercise control and they weren't fun to be around.
Yeah.
Right? Or in and of ourselves, like, we're not fun to be around, and we're probably not enjoying life. So there is this, like, you know, sometimes just got to let it go, and it feels scary, but it's kind of like vulnerability. You know, that's scary, but that's one of the most courageous things that we can do. And so I think it's just tasting that and seeing how it works. And then you just bite a little bit more off at a time. And then you're like, wow, this is super empowering for them. It's super liberating for me. But, and I think the book Untethered Soul helped influence some of that too. Like some of the work we did with Tony Robbins in combination of reading the book Untethered Soul. Cause it's just like, I'm going to untether. Like, why am I so tied up? Again, it kind of goes back to me. And so the more personal work I've done, the less lit up I am about how everyone else is showing up.
What's
how
the hardest
they're supposed to show up?
What's the hardest thing anyone's ever told you, like from your team or personal or whatever, that like feedback wise or whatever, that was made you be like, whoa?
Probably like when I hurt people, when I hurt their feelings, because my intention is always to help them. And so I'll say things out
like,
of
I can't even imagine that.
Honesty. And it's like with such a deep level of like care for them. And if they don't see that, they'll just think like, oh my gosh, that that really hurt me, or they like take something personal and they didn't hear I want you to, like, you should do this. Like, did you see that about yourself? Or I'll like, give that perspective, and they didn't really want to hear that perspective, and it hurts them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, that wasn't the intention.
God, all I can hear is my dad saying, this spanking is going to hurt me more than it hurts you.
Which is true. Like, that is so true, right?
My dad said that too, but I think
that is so true.
I only got spanked like a couple times growing up.
Yeah, so it's just like unintentionally when I'm trying to help somebody, and then I feel like honesty is a way to help them.
Totally.
And I've learned, like, you can't always, you might be able to see something in them and you can give them an advice, but you have to, I can recognize now I'm at a different level of maturity and personal work that you can't always say what you see. And so true. You just have to let them, you're like, well, I hope they figure that out.
Right.
When I was saying the things that I was saying, it was from a place of I wanted to help them.
Totally.
But it was also a place of arrogance or ego, because I wanted to help them because of how it made me feel to help them. Like, we have to recognize, like,
that's huge.
It makes you feel a certain way when you help somebody.
When you help people. Yeah.
Now, that's not a bad thing, right? Like, great, keep helping people. It makes you, it's better than doing drugs or drinking or doing other things. Like, that's a great hit of dopamine. And it's recognizing, if I'm going to share this with you, is this going to actually cause you to change? Is this going to actually help you? Or is it just going to make me feel good because I gave you advice that you should have taken and you don't? It's having that emotional level of maturity to recognize. Yeah. Sometimes I'm better off withholding.
Totally.
Than going.
Yeah. I think the hard part about all that is that we have to give out of the desire to give with nothing in return or expectation.
Giver's gain.
I used to have this confrontation with my wife every family holiday because she'd be spending all the time cooking everything, and then people would show up late. And I finally told her, I'm like, if you don't want to cook for the right reason, then stop cooking. Yeah. But you can't be pissed off at everybody for all these things. Either do it out of the goodness of your heart or stop doing it, because I hate the fact that you resent it afterwards. Yeah. So it's kind of just having that, like, I'm going to give this advice and hopefully it works out, but I'm not expecting any appreciation or gratitude out of it. And if it backfires,
and there's pretty much my life in my family. I don't expect any gratitude or acknowledgement for anything in my family.
Right. Yeah. And one of the most profound quotes I've ever heard is, trade your expectation for appreciation. Yeah. That one changed my life, and hearing that, because anytime, and that's where I went on that whole journey with gratitude.
You can't change people. You can change your expectations of them, right? Of your relationship with them. Right.
But if I'm constantly expecting something, then I can get upset or angry or whatever. Versus, okay, what am I going to find that I just appreciate about this person or this situation?
What was that saying again?
Trade your expectations for appreciations.
I like that.
And that's my
takeaway today.
That changes your emotional home.
No, there's a lot more.
There's such a thing as like your emotional home, right? Like we all have like primary emotions that we live in. And some of us, it's like anger or fear, worry. If it's not in a positive state or in a beautiful state, then you should be shifting your, like, what can you do to shift that? And so I just found myself, when I was trying to control, I expected things to go a certain way. That's cranky. That's a cranky place to be, And so that's where I went on this whole shift of gratitude, because when you're in gratitude, you can't be in fear.
Just rainbows and butterflies over here.
Rainbows and you are my rainbows and butterflies gal, so I love you. There's no crankiness. There's no cranky town.
No.
That's because she's not saving lives.
Only on a trail from time to time.
Only on a trail.
Yes.
Yes,
that does happen.
Yeah. I think what's really cool for me, like, to observe is that for you, I feel like since I've known you, the mental fitness, just as much as the business side of things, has always kind of gone hand in hand. And I see more and more of that now, where people are really realizing that holistic approach to being successful in business is not just about the skills, it's really about the other pieces too. But it's so cool to really think about, you've been doing that for a long time. It really has been, I feel like, such a fabric of how you do things is that the emotional fitness piece. So have you noticed that too, that a lot of people are really starting to put more and more of their arms around that, the mental side of things?
Yeah, I think people are understanding that concept is more important. I think it's becoming a more important piece in society, especially with like the last year, right?
2020 made everybody human again.
Yeah, right. Like there's a lot of people were inside and home, or it didn't.
Or didn't.
It magnified if you're a hole already. Then you. you got outed even more so. And I think it was a must for me, right? Like before that even happened, my grandmother took her life, and my uncle took his life. And there's like this rampant, amount of depression and just like not good emotional health, we would call it, right, inside of our family. And I never wanted to be, on, medications or things like that. And so I said, well, I'm going to go on this journey of if I'm going to change the generational outcome of our family, like this isn't a should, this is an absolute must for me to focus on this piece of it to make sure that I am like as emotionally fit as possible, right? Like work on myself, resolve, the conflicts and all the stuff that goes on. And that's a journey that I went on. Right. And so I think that's the difference. Some people will hear that and just go, well, like, yeah, I like that personal development stuff. I learn a thing here and there, or, some of these things feel good. And I think the difference for me and why I can acknowledge like a shift in myself so much over the last, 5 years or so is because it was an absolute must. Like the reason behind that, it wasn't like a kind of do it. It's you have to actually do that. And then I lost my mom, in 2018 to suicide as well. And so when that happened, thank God I'd been on that personal development and like wellness journey because I already had like forgiven her for certain things and actually told her that. So like when she was gone from this world, I didn't have any regrets. With that relationship or frankly, where I was at mentally, right? Like I was able to show up fairly strong, in not a
and authentically,
situation.
Right?
And authentically.
I mean, some people can really wear that and then underneath they're like a disaster. But like you were just so authentic in all that work that you did. I just think it's so cool that you had the foresight and like this laser focus on knowing that that's what you needed for the health and wealth and
like a survival.
Success of
it's
your
like
life.
Literally, because to me, that's like literally survival. Because we're talking about generationally, like people taking their lives, and I'm going, okay, well, at a point in time, my mom was like a strong badass, and then she wasn't. So I'm going that, you see that, and you go, all right, well, while I'm like about my wits, I'm gonna do this and be super intentional, for myself, for my kids. Like, we have to make a change here. We cannot continue down this road. And so I think that was like a big piece of it.
That's huge.
That's a big piece.
Yeah.
It always goes down to the motivation, right? Like what's the motivation for somebody to do it?
Totally. I'm always super impressed at like how great you're able to just put everything into the words, like, how you describe the effect of something or why you did something. I admire that a lot. It's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what's what's your favorite book? Or what are you reading right now that's had a huge impact?
I'm reading like 3 different books right now. Untethered Soul was a big one, like I mentioned. I'm doing Tony Robbins' book again right now. It's not the Awaken the Giant one. It's the Unleash the Power Within. I'm redoing that one. And then Jay Shetty.
Think Like a Monk.
I'm like, it's something a monk.
I
just pop an Audible and I just
now.
listen. Are you
awesome,
listening to that one right now?
Yeah.
So I'm really enjoying those 2. And you know what? I've actually shifted. I was doing like so many books in Audible, but now podcasts, right? Like now I'm listening, to you guys and some other.
Oh my God, we
have
one subscriber.
I have a bunch of subscribers. But like podcasts have become like a great new way to get information.
Yeah.
Totally.
Aside from just the books. But there are like some go-to books too. Like I reread every year, like Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like there's a couple. I'm like, I got to reread this one.
Yep. I love Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich was back in 2004, 5. This one investor that I had, very wealthy guy, very influential, ran a huge budget at HP, and he was like scared the death out of me when I first met him. And he's like, hey, if we're going to go down this road, I need you to read this book. And it was like the first time I'd really gotten into like one of those books because my dad wasn't big into that stuff. And I remember like just being blown away, and I couldn't like stop reading it. And it was just, it's just such a great
like
book.
One great idea after another, right? Like I went from being like not a reader at all. I used to brag in high school, like I would never read the book, but I still get an A on the book report, right? Like I could do the summary.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes, right? And then it probably was like the relationship I had with learning too. I just did not I was like, why do I want to read? Like, this is slow and boring and, you know, whatever. And then I started realizing modeling, right? Like, you see all of these people that are at a level that you would like to be at, not just in business, but like in other pieces, other aspects of happiness in your life. And I'm like, oh, well, that's how you get that information, is by reading. Like, that's what changes that, like, that refuels me, that re-energizes me, because if I'm like,
it's invigorating.
What you focus on, you feel. So if I'm reading a book and it's like lighting me up, like, I can have new ideas, right? I have a different focus, and I can light the fire again, you know, when sometimes like, you know, you get in the grind of things every day and you just get focused, but there's like, sometimes the fire is not always there.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great way to actually.
What's something you want to do that you haven't done yet?
Something I want to do that I haven't done yet.
Or are going to do?
I jumped out of a plane. I don't know that I want to do that one again.
I'm out
I'm
on
afraid
that.
of heights. I'm actually afraid
I
of
don't
heights.
understand why you have to wear a helmet. I really don't.
You said that the other day. Like, why do you wear a helmet?
Why?
That's a good point. You're already smashed anyway. Like, if that goes wrong, like,
if anything goes wrong,
it's like an egg that cracks. That has a shell. But
I'm just like, I don't understand why you would wear a helmet. Maybe some earphones or something, but like, I don't get it.
Oh man. Something that I haven't done yet. I have played with the thought of having my own podcast. So
you should.
I haven't done yet.
Yeah.
So
you and I have talked about launching a platform for mental fitness.
Yeah.
You're a good
conversation.
Do you find that there's a segment of the population that you're good at influencing? Like, I mean, I have my opinion on that, but I'd love to hear what you think. Because you're such an influencer.
I'm not sure. I think the people that hear it in the moment and take action, you know, are the ones that need to hear are usually in the right place at the right time, or it gets referred on to somebody else. I'm still resolving in myself is that, like, my reward for things is when people take action.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wasn't the person that coined the phrase at all, but there's a term called ask hole, A-S-K hole.
Yep. And there's mask holes now.
There's mask holes?
Yeah.
Oh, from mess. Yes. From COVID times.
Mask holes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So the ask holes, right? I'm happy to give the information. Like, I will pour it into people. And I want to see you, like, take action. Yeah. Like, just take a step. It could be a baby step, but do something and then take another step and keep going.
Right. I've been saying ask hole forever because I feel like, I mean, that's just a big part of the population.
Don't be an asshole.
It is.
Like, take action. Do something.
Yeah.
So.
Stop irritating me.
But again, that goes back to I say that and I go, why does that affect me? Why does that influence me? Like, why do I have a charge over that? Yeah. Again, it goes back to something that's going on with me. I got to resolve that.
Yeah. You know, back to me. It doesn't bug me anymore. It used to bug me a lot. It used to bug me so much, but
it doesn't bug me as much, but it's still there.
Because for that individual, wherever they're at, whatever results that they're generating for themselves are directly reflected into the fact that they have or have not taken action. So keep asking, and hopefully someday you'll actually do something. But, you know, I can't attach to that for them, but I'm happy to share. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Right?
So as far as who's influenced, I mean, my goal is to influence the people that are closest to me first. Yeah. Right? Like family, team. Those have made the commitment to be in my world, you know, close by. Right. And then I extend it out from there, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I call it equal opportunity, unequal reward.
That's like a total bumper sticker right there.
That's why I tell people when they're like, well, that's not fair. That person got more leads. And I'm like, but they have a higher conversion rate.
Right.
It's equal opportunity. You had the same opportunity.
Feed the strong, starve the weak. Like, that's so horrible of me to say, but when you think about it from a lead generation standpoint, if you're running a big corporation, they're spending a ton of money to bring in a lead, and that lead costs them X to get in the door. Are they going to give it to somebody that's, you know, so and so deserves a shot? Let's
which we do give people a shot. We give you, like,
if they have a track record
20,
for not,
you got to do something with it.
Participation trophies at Carin's team,
or do you give them?
But we don't.
Or do you give them to your killer? Do you give them to the person that you know is going to get it done?
No, it's rewarded based on the higher conversion.
Right. Yeah.
And
simple.
And I want to be surrounded by people that are like, well, I want to do that. I'm capable of that. Yeah. Now, how do I get to that? Okay, great. Like, again, first is this decision, their state. Like, I'm determined. I'm going to be there. I got to figure out how. What's my story? And now I go and get it.
Yeah.
Great. I'll give you all the in between. Let's go. I'll give you all the in between.
And she said it just like that. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
So I want to end on this story. I'm so grateful that you came in. It just like when you were talking, it reminded me of our good friend Kim Ryan.
Yes,
And
love her.
That's kind of
love
like
her.
even some of your voice reminds me a little bit of Kim, and I know that she was your broker
She's one
for
of
a
my
while.
soul sisters. Yeah,
I know,
for sure.
but it's I don't even know if you know this story. Is that so? I didn't really know Carin at the time, but when Wendy and I were out looking for a house finally in 2012, we went to this open house, and Kim was the agent, and that's really where I met Kim and kind of got introduced to Carin, and we ended up buying that house after we canceled on it twice, and it was a total mess, but that was kind of that connection with Kim, and Kim really like got me through a lot of crazy shit when I went through it with my dad. She's so amazing. So it's just kind of like that funny story. That was one of those connections.
Yeah, that was one of the first connections.
You're Carin's broker. It wasn't she was Kim Ryan. I'm like, oh, you're Carin's broker. Like my way in to talk to Carin.
Now she's just Kimberly Ryan.
Now she's just Kimberly Ryan.
Her own force.
I know.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She is awesome.
I remember her when she worked at your brokerage. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she's amazing.
She is amazing.
Maybe she'll be up next.
Maybe. It's on my list.
A future OTP content.
Thank you so much for all the share, and just guys, where can somebody follow you on? Are you on social or are you?
I'm on all the social. Except I'm not on TikTok. I can't waste time with those young folks on TikTok right now.
I can't do it
I follow my kids on TikTok, but it's just my name. It looks like Carin Nguyen, but it's spelled Carin, Carin, and then my last name, it's pronounced Nguyen, but it looks like Nguyen, so it's Nguyen. So just first and last name. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome.
Yay! You're one of my favorite people. I love you.